Hey guys, I wanted to put a video together reviewing this 50-pound Brinly push spreader, which I purchased off Amazon 2 or 3 months ago. And since then I've been able to use it a number of times using a few different products, and I feel like I can give a pretty honest review at this point. What I came from was the Scotts EdgeGuard DLX or Deluxe model. I really don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about this. For what it is, I think it's a great little unit. I think I got it paid 30 bucks for it secondhand, and certainly got my money's worth. It does have these smaller plastic wheels. It's got the orange edge guard. Opening and closing the gate is done by a spring loaded handle, and then of course you have edge guard controls here. One advantage of the Scotts brand spreader is that a lot of the products aimed towards the homeowner often list the Scotts settings, and that's certainly helpful if you're just getting into this and you need that kind of assistance. But I'm at the point now where I've gotten a little more serious about my yard care, and I wanted to get a unit that was one step closer to the commercial grade higher end products, something that was a little more durable, maybe more robust, and just higher performance and easier to use. So I settled on this 50-pound Brinly push spreader. It's offered in 2 different versions, with and without the side deflector. I opted to get the model with the side deflector. Now interestingly, there doesn't appear to be any kind of savings if you buy them bundled together. I think if you buy the spreader without and then purchase the side deflector separately, it comes to about the same price. So for that reason, I'd say if you have a yard or an area that wouldn't typically need the side deflector, you could always purchase the model without, and then should you decide to get it later, you can go ahead and buy that separately, and it ends up being about the same cost. This particular model does come with the rain cover as well as the strainer for breaking up any clumps of material as you're pouring it into the hopper. Material is moved around using this cotter pin, which you see is pretty standard on this style spreader. There's a lot of similar products out there from the competition that I'm sure you've seen. I can't say whether or not they're identical. I imagine each manufacturer puts their own little twist on things to make it their own, but they are, well, at least certainly a sticker, right? But this one here really is the one I ended up going with. It does have the larger pneumatic wheels. These are 12 by 3 inches with 6-inch rims, plastic rims. They are certainly not a cheap plastic. They feel very robust, very sturdy, maybe a composite, I'm not sure. But one thing I liked about the plastic rims versus some of the competition, which may have the painted steel, was just one less thing to rust over time. And when I did see these in person and saw how well they were made, that just reaffirmed my decision. It does have the larger gearbox on the bottom. And then of course a better look at the side deflector. The side deflector is controlled simply by using this wing nut here on the side. You can loosen and tighten that to lift it up and lower it when needed. I'll just point out a tip about that. When I was first using this first couple of times, I think it was the second time I was using it, I thought I had this wing nut tight enough when the side deflector was in the upright position, and I didn't notice it, but while I was going, the side deflector was falling. By the time I noticed it, it was about sitting sideways like that, and after a week or two I noticed I was seeing some darker green stripes in the lawn. So that was a lesson learned there, just to make sure when you do have your deflector up or down that this wing nut is certainly tight enough to secure it in place. Now along those lines, when I did switch over to the Brinly, it was a little bit overwhelming at first, and I say that because I'll use the analogy of the EdgeGuard Deluxe is kind of like this compact car that you've been driving for a while and gotten really comfortable using it, and then you decide to borrow your buddy's SUV for the weekend, and when you're driving that, you're paying a little bit more attention or distracted by whether you're in the lines on the road, watching your speedometer, making sure you're going the right speed, those type of things. And similarly, when I started using the Brinly, the first couple times, first 2 or 3 times, I was really trying to pay close attention to my walk speed, watching the spreader swath to see how far it was spreading, to make sure I was getting proper overlap, trying to pay close attention to my lever here that opens and closes the gate. So you may have a similar experience too when you go from a very common basic homeowner version unit to something of higher quality and performance like the Brinly. Is you may feel a little uncomfortable at first, and I think that's okay, and with time you would just get more comfortable using it, which is certainly the experience I've had. The spreader range on this spreader is 10 through 30, which is pretty typical for this style of push spreader. Now I will say you will not find, or at least I have not found, a product where they will list Brinly spreader on the back of the bag and it'll give you a recommended setting. Fortunately, the manufacturer has provided in the owner's manual a pretty extensive list of products from various manufacturers with a recommended spreader setting. And I'll say it's probably just that, a recommended setting. In fact, there's one common product that's used regularly by many people, which is the Scotts EdgeGuard, and that particular table in the manual lists the same setting for 2 different app rates. So there's some question there as to what's going on, but that just leads you to believe that what the information they're providing is simply a recommendation. Your experience may vary. There's so many different variables that go into the spreader application rates. One big thing being walk speed, and whether you're doing single or double passing, things of that nature. Spreader setting is quickly adjusted by sliding this plastic knob and then tighten it in place as a stop, and that will open and close the gates inside the hopper. Now, one recommendation I would make is when you do tighten this knob, you want to make sure it is very tight, but also be careful, because I have seen reviews on other spreaders which have a similar design that this wing nut can actually break. So what I do is when I tighten it, I try to grab it towards the center. That way I'm not putting so much force on the outer edges of that wing nut. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because in the first few uses I thought I had that tight enough, but what was happening, it wasn't. Upon opening and closing the hopper, that stop was actually hopping back, and I was actually applying a heavier rate as I was going. So a lesson learned there is I made sure that each time I make that snug enough so I get a nice tight fit. Assembly is very straightforward. I did put a video up about that. Essentially it's just assembling the handle and linkage assembly that controls the gate. Not a whole lot there. I have read on, for some of the competition, some nightmare reviews where essentially you order the spreader and what shows up is a box of parts, and you've got to put it all together with some not so great assembly instructions. This Brinly unit, super easy to put together. Even the side deflector comes with its own set of instructions, making it easy to put on. I have gotten in the habit of rinsing this unit off after each application. Just take a simple garden hose, hose it down. The instructions do advise to avoid direct water at the gearbox down there, so I do that. I avoid that, and then if it does get wet, I'll just wipe it down. In fact, I dry off the whole unit after use. But doing so just keeps the hopper clean and the assembly down here free moving, and will maintain your calibration as best as possible. The handle is height adjustable. There is an opportunity to make an adjustment and change the height. It comes at its tallest setting, which works great for me. I'm 6'6", so I do appreciate the taller handle height. That's one thing that was a benefit of going to a unit like this over the Scotts, is the Scotts has a lower handle. So I'm pushing at a more natural height with the Brinly unit. I want to talk briefly about spreader settings and the spread width. The Scotts unit, I would say, has about a 5 to 6 foot spread width or swath I think they call it. The Brinly is actually about 10 or 12 feet. So that took a little bit getting used to, because I was so used to wanting to keep tighter rows, and now I'm having to go a little bit wider. But that's a lot less walking you have to do. So you do get a much wider spread with the Brinly unit. As far as settings go, I want to use this video also as a tool to share spreader settings. I don't want to mention any particular products or settings in the actual video itself, but what I'm going to do, because I'm starting to keep a very detailed log of my experience and the settings I've used for various different products, I've gotten pretty comfortable with understanding which settings are appropriate for certain application rates, and I'm going to provide that information down below in the description, and I'll just keep that as a running list. As I discover new settings, I will go ahead and add them. And I also encourage you guys, if you have this particular spreader and you have a product that you're very confident in a particular spreading for a certain app rate, let me know, put it in a comment down below, and I'll go ahead and pull that information and add it to the description. And this way we'll kind of have a comprehensive list for us Brinly users who may not have the information on the back of a bag, that we can reference and just keep in touch with the latest settings for a good wide range of products. Thanks again for watching, guys. I appreciate the time. I'll see you again.